Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning back into the Automation Show. My name is Shawn Tierney from Insights. And in this episode, I actually have a special guest join me, Travis Cox from Inductive Automation, to tell us all about Ignition 8.3. He's going to run through the new features and he's going to give us a demo. And whether you're watching or listening, I think you're going to find this very interesting. And I really appreciate Travis coming on. And I appreciate Inductive Automation sponsoring this episode so I could bring it to you completely ad-free. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into this week's episode of the Automation Show and learn all about Inductive Automation's Ignition 8.3. Travis, welcome to the show. I'm excited to learn today about what's new in Ignition 8.3. But before we jump into that, I was hoping you could take a moment and introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, thanks, Shawn, for having me. So my name is Travis Cox. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist here in Inductive Automation. I just tell people I speak the gospel of Ignition. That's what I do. I've been with the company for almost 22 years. I was the third employee there, and I've always sat more on the technical side, helping customers, with their architectures, applying best practices, figuring out how to integrate solutions, figure out how to really leverage, Ignition and to kind of get to the art of the possible. So I'm really excited to be here with you and to share Ignition 8.3. It's an exciting release.
Yeah, I'm excited too to see what's new in it because I love following your updates. You guys do a great job, even on the minor points, keeping your customers up to speed on what's going on. And I really felt just from reading the updates, like you're really doing a good job trying to incorporate requests from the customer into your product, which is always very much appreciated. So let me turn it back to you. Let's learn what's new.
All right, yeah. So we're going to do a guided tour through Ignition 8.3. It's a big release. There's so many new features in there. So we're gonna get the big hitting ones. There's many other smaller ones, but here we'll give you a good tour and we'll kind of show those live in action and give you a good sense of what it has to offer. So let's start with just a little bit of information about 8.3. We released it on September 16th this year. This was a couple months ago. We released it at our conference, ICC conference, and this has been a release that's been going on for a couple of years, and it's a comprehensive update to the Ignition platform. There's a lot of things that we've seen our vision that we wanted to have for Ignition, and this release really took a little while, but we actually are able to realize that vision. And really, it's to bring the worlds of OT and IT together. So that we can obviously leverage the best that OT has, but also leverage the best that IT has and bring in the latest and greatest technologies into the OT landscape. I think it's a really important thing to be able to do for how people want to deploy systems, manage these systems, the types of things they're trying to connect to. So we really wanted to design this version to be the world's most powerful, open, and flexible application development platform. So the big focus on this release is to unlock data's full potential. We've added more connectors, especially drivers to PLCs. We've added connectors, things like Kafka, and ways to be able to move data around in some unique ways that we'll show here today. We've also simplified project workflows. So for people that are building HMI and SCADA applications with our perspective module, there's drawing tools, there's new form components, there's just easier ways to build those applications to get that to where you want it to go. And a big focus of this release is how to manage and configure the systems with ease. In that now people are deploying lots of systems out there, especially at the edge, and you have lots of them. You want to be able to manage them, make that part easier, and also to leverage kind of the best-in-class tools out there for things like version control and DevOps, which we'll go through and show today. And it's all about deploying and securing these large systems and how we can, make that as efficient as possible and handle millions of data points that are out there. And there's a lot of enhancements to optimizations and security in this release that aid in those larger scale-out systems. And of course, this is an LTS release, so it means long-term support, which means that it's supported for 5 years. So we're going to continue adding critical fixes and minor features to this release as we go along, and they get that peace of mind, that this is going to be stable and will be supported for that term, for that duration there. So that's a little bit about Ignition 8.3. What we really want to do is go and see these features in action. So here's what we're going to take a look at today. We're going to look at the new redesigned Ignition Gateway, the web UI, and it's a better UI UX experience. We're going to show what that has to offer. We'll look at our new historian, especially with our embedded historian that's built into Ignition based on QuestDB. We'll take a look at perspective, and that's the native HTML5 visualization and the drawing tools and the offline forms that are part of that. We'll show a small but mighty feature called alarm metrics, and we'll look at event streams, which is a brand new module. This is a low-code, no-code way of moving data around with the Kafka connector that we have with that. And then we'll end up with some DevOps. We'll show version control, the new REST API, and this exciting feature called deployment modes that allows you to have environment separation. So that's kind of the goal here for today. And Shawn, if you want to dive in at any point, have any questions, feel free. So we're gonna hit on all these features and give you a good sense of how they work. Let's start with the new redesigned Ignition Gateway webpage. So I have Ignition installed on my local machine here. Of course, it is super easy to go to the website, and you can go to the downloads page of the website. And there you can download Ignition for your operating system. There's Windows, Linux, and Mac installers. There's also a Docker image. You can go and deploy that super easily. We also have some Helm charts that you could deploy through Kubernetes. There's a lot of options for how to get Ignition out there, and it runs in a 2-hour trial period. So everything I'm going to show you today, you can go and play with. And at the end of 2 hours, you just press a reset button. You try again for another 2 hours.
Nice.
So you can fully evaluate every part of Ignition that way. So here is my Ignition 8.3 on my local machine. This is the new web UI. And for those of you who are brand new to Ignition, if you install 8.3, it's going to be very intuitive and easy to start with. People that are familiar with the older release, Ignition 8.1 and before, it's going to be a little bit different. But the idea was to guide you to places very quickly and to combine the idea of status and configuration in one view. So if I'm not logged in, all I can do is be able to go and see what this server is and be able to launch those applications that were built out, as well as launch the designer. But as soon as we go ahead and log in, this is where we can actually go and modify the config. And we have a couple different areas. We have our platform area, which is all the configuration for the Ignition platform as at the top level, especially security. There's connections to things like MQTT and Kafka and databases and devices. There's network where we can get to the gateway network and our enterprise administration module and configuring the web server. There's services for things like our historian, our tag system, our alarming system, all the information about those services, as well as, of course, diagnostics to see how Ignition's performing. Get a quick glance at all of that. So if I look at the platform, one of my favorite features of this web UI is this overview page right here, because it gives all the config at a glance. I can see everything that's happening, what's configured, and what's possibly going wrong all in one view. And so you can see here, I've actually got a database connection that has an error. So if I expand that, there's my local database. It's faulted. Looks like I have an access denied. I can go straight over to that area, and I can get more details on the error message. Of course, I can then just go ahead and I have the wrong password here. So I'm going to go ahead and update that password in this config, save those changes, and now it's valid, ready to go. With that, go back up here to my platform overview. I can see that issue is taken care of, and this one's okay, but really easy to see that information at a glance. Also, if you didn't know where something's at, you can go up here and just go search. Let's go device connections or devices and go right to it. I can see the devices that are configured. So it's a really quick way to see what's going on, to see the status of config all in that one view. So we really think this is going to be a much easier way to manage all of those connections and to manage all that configuration very quickly. So that's a very important feature, is we always want to make the UI UX experience much better for Ignition people when they're in the gateway configuration as well as in the designer for Ignition. The next feature we're going to look at is the Industrial Historian Solution Suite. So we've always had Historian built into Ignition. And if I go to my services down here, this is where I go to my historians. And we've always been able to connect to SQL databases. So with that, we can log data to MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Postgres, you name it. And a lot of people are using Postgres with the timescale extension, which is the time series database extension to that. So kind of combining relational and time series together. So we still have that, of course, with Ignition 8.3, but now we've introduced a brand new core historian. And this is a built-in historian. It's built into Ignition. It comes with it out of the box. It's embedded inside of Ignition, but it is not proprietary. It is based on open source technology. It's based on QuestDB. It's a very popular time series database. It's very performant, and we've been able to do benchmarking with bringing in millions of data points and be able to not affect the query speed and be able to bring that data back. So we think this is perfect for brand new users who are coming in. They can install Ignition, and they can have a great historian built in. They can log data for a couple of years, no problem. And a lot of people are then looking at, what's my final resting place? Am I going to the cloud or going to a corporate data center? Where are we doing with that? But this is a great way to start. All you got to do is simply create one. I'm going to call it local historian. And we can go down here and specify pruning, which can delete old data, or archiving, where we can archive data into a folder after some time period. And that's it. I'll create the historian. Now I have it ready to go. Of course, we can go to our designer. I can go to any tag I have in the system. So I'm going to go to these realistic tags, right click, edit, come down here, turn on the historian, go to that local historian here. That's it. Press OK. All the data is now being logged directly in that embedded time series database. And it's super easy. From that point, I can go over here to my charts. I can expand. I can see those tags are logged, bring it on. Boom. I can see the data coming in very quickly. So very, very fast way to get started with the historian. All that data, of course, is easily to get out of Ignition, from there. And just to mention, we have an SDK. It is possible to actually extend this list of historians, these engines, with your own if you wanted to. We have a great API that allows anybody to extend. So we've actually had some partners who've created extensions to their storage formats. Most notably is Flow Software with Timebase. They've been able to build that as a module. So lots of cool stuff that's possible with this new historian area.
That looked like it was really easy to do. It seemed like, and correct me if I'm wrong, the goal of doing that core historian was, as you just showed, to be able to set up your historian in under a minute. Whereas if I was going to SQL Server, installing SQL it's a whole other thing I have to go through. And so was that what it was? I mean, did you just want people to be able to get it and start collecting data right away without having or forcing them to really like install a SQL Server or a MySQL or something else?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, SQL database has been great. And from the very beginning of this company, we've logged data to a database. We have that bridge between an OPC server and a SQL database.
Yeah.
But that requires people to install database and to also then manage it. While a lot of IT departments are doing that for the OT side, some companies don't have the IT department who can manage that. And so it's an expertise level that some people just, they just don't have. Whereas with this, they don't have to worry about any of that. It all comes in. There's not installing anything outside of Ignition, and it is based on modern technology that is very performant and gives you a lot of power. So absolutely, we want to make that journey to Ignition, especially for the new people, really simple.
Yeah, that was simple. I love the workflow there, how you went through that. And you had a historical trend going in no time. I think you did the whole thing in under a minute, which was impressive. So let me turn it back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the goal. We want to, our motto is kind of first make it possible and then make it really easy. And that's what we've done here with the historian for sure. And that's goes to our next area, which is our drawing tools in our application editor, and the forms, to be able to build forms and to have offline forms. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So let's start with the drawing tools. We have a visualization system called Perspective, and that's where and you saw me kind of in there already with this trend. This is where we can build, screens and build the applications that we have. And we've had, various symbols inside of Ignition, like, motors and pumps. And we have a lot of SVGs that come with the symbol factory graphics. But a lot of people want to be able to edit SVGs inside of our designer, as well as to be able to create ones from scratch. And that's what we've added here in 8.3 with Perspective. I can go over here to a drawing component, drag it on the screen, and I can go in here and simply, let's say I want to make this 100 by 100. I can go in and let's say I just want to do something as simple as drawing a circle. I know it's not very exciting, but for people who have been editing in Perspective before 8.3, it was not as easy to draw a circle as it is now with these drawing tools. And so with that, I can go over, I can change the color of this, let's go over here, make it red. And so super easy to make that, press apply. Now I have an SVG. This is a simple SVG, but I've got an SVG. And there's lots of graphics that way. I can go up here to our symbol factory. This is what we've had in there. So for example, if I take this motor, I could take the motor in here, and I can then go edit it. Let's say, I didn't like this circle up here. I want to get rid of that. Or I want to bind or link this square to the color, to the PLC and change the color. Well, we can do that really easily. So here's my SVG. I can take this square, click on the bind next to the fill. I can link that to a tag. Let's say we go over here to our writable integer 1 tag, and I'll do a little map that says if the value is 0, 1, 2, we're going to go to a color, and 0, I'll make it red, 1, I'll make it green, kind of the classic sense here. Let me do 2 and press OK. So now I've got the binding on there, and press apply, and now I've got an SVG that I've edited. I can also, of course, change that shape or modify it all within that drawing editor very quickly. And if at this point, if the value changes, let's go down here and make this set to a 1. You can see it's green, right? As simple as that, in terms of being able to do it. Another part that's really, I think, important is that if I can make this, let's go 80 pixels tall, I can actually add text right inside here. So let's say I make this, motor 1, and this is SVG text. And the reason that's important is that automatically scales. So if you've got an HMI screen where you've got a bunch of text on there, you can have that combined with the SVGs, and really it makes that a lot easier for the scaling for what you're trying to accomplish there.
So you have an SVG editor inside of your application, and when you open it up, to me, it kind of reminds me of Paint, right? So everybody's familiar with Windows Paint, but on steroids. And you're even editing your symbol factory graphics in there and adding animation in that editor, tying the property, like the color property of a tag or the color property of a part of an object to a tag, all within inside that editor. And by adding the text in there, now you have scalable vector graphics, the features of scalable vector graphics with the text, so that no matter what size you make it, it's not hunting for a font size. It's actually scaling like you would want it to scale, and maintaining that perspective. I mean, that's impressive. And so the new thing here is it's a new interface, easy to use flow as far as using the editing. It sounded like you did have this feature in before, but you've updated it. Am I correct?
So we actually didn't have the drawing editor at all. I mean, for
Okay.
SVGs, you can bring the SVGs in, but what it looked like was essentially an SVG with all these elements over here, and you're like, what is this path?
Yep.
And it was very hard. So obviously, if you want to edit it, it makes that difficult. If you wanted the binding is the combination of the editor with the binding is really powerful, and nobody has to go outside in a third-party SVG editor and then use that and then bring it back.
That's cool.
So it's really nice. And then, of course, you can also take an SVG that you have outside of Ignition. I can drag it in. So this is our logo. I'm bringing it in and embedding it. So there we go. And of course, I can go in real quick. If I have one, I want to make some changes. I want to remove the text down here. Boom, boom. And now I've got that logo. And that was just real easy to make those quick modifications. When you're building these kind of screens, it's really nice to have that editor just to go quick. Nobody wants to have to worry with multiple tools, right? You just want to do it all right there in the designer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's amazing. I love it.
Along with that, another thing that people have been trying to do, of course, when you're building applications, you're not just building HMI SCADA screens, you're also building forms, people entering in data manually. And, you were doing that before by adding in text fields onto screens, right? Or adding buttons on there to save and labels and drop down lists and all these individual components. That's great, but that can be time consuming in building out the form. And so what we have now is a new component in perspective for forms. And a couple different examples, but if I drag this on here, it's one component where I can define the entirety of the form, all the form fields, the validation, and it does all the submission, all that for you. And the biggest reason is so that we can make it easier to build forms, and it can also have dynamic forms, but it's to get to a place where we can have offline forms. This is where I'm gonna end with. But this first component here allows me to go in. I can simply say, you know what? Let's go down here to here's our text widget. And let's say I want this label to be first name, right? So you change that first name. Here's the text, and text, I want that validation here to, I'm going to do a required field. So it's a required field. It means if I'm in the runtime and I go next, it's going to say, hey, no, you got to fill out this field. It's all done for you, all built in. And there's all sorts of different widgets. So let's say I want to do another one, and this widget's going to be a, password or URL or dropdown or checkbox or any of these things. So I can do a dropdown, and in the dropdown, I can specify multiple options. So let's do option 1, and then I'll do another one here, option 2. And this seems a little bit like there's a lot of config over here. We're going to be adding an editor to this to make it easier for that. But what's important is that I can actually bind this whole thing to a query or something and make this dynamic, which is really powerful to be able to do. So you can see I can really build out these forms pretty quick. And I've got a form already built out. So this one here, this machine safety inspection checklist. And this one, I am, when it's submitting, it's firing a submission event, and we're actually handling that, this inspection, so that it can actually log to a database very easily. And whether I'm doing it from the browser or if I'm doing it from my native app, it's going to be able to guarantee that when they submit it, that it's going to get there. It's going to be stored. And so I can easily then, let's go launch this client. Here I'm in my browser. Let's go and say compressor 1, I'm doing inspection. This is Travis doing it. And I'm going to check these boxes. There was a problem. So we do that, submit it, and that form was submitted. Now, if I go to my database, I can look at my inspection form, and there, sure enough, there's a record in there for that inspection. But what's really cool here is I'm going to show you now the native app, because this is where it gets real powerful, especially for being offline. So let me mirror my phone. All right, so I'm going to add this application to my phone. So I'm going to go down to my Ignition server. There we go, this one. Here's my demo application. So let's edit that one. I'm going to make it available offline. So you can see right now it's downloading it top left. And I'm not offline right now, but if I go in, I can use that form. That's great. I can enter the data. But let's say I was offline. So for the sake of this, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to stop Ignition for a moment, since I'm all on the same machine. And it's going to make this thing go offline. So we're going to mirror my phone again, and you're going to see what this looks like in an offline way. All right, so let's go back in there. Of course, it's not going to be able to connect to the gateway. It's going to say, hey, I'm disconnected, and it's still going to run, still going to work. So if I'm out there, no Wi-Fi, no cellular, I can still go in and let's say pump. We're going to do pump 1, and this is me doing it. And here we go. Let's go and just everything looks good. Submit that. And here, what's happening, you see it's added to the offline queue. So if I go and look, there's a queue, submission queue. And when I get back in range, this data will automatically happen. So let's bring Ignition back up, and we're going to see this data automatically come back into Ignition. And so this is what's really powerful, is to be able to, I can still have this application work even though I'm offline. So here it's almost ready. There it goes. It was brought back up. Let's go in here, refresh, and now there's my pump. It got added to the database. So a really powerful feature to be able to build these forms, and especially to have these forms available offline when I'm not connected to that server, no matter where I happen to be, to be able to do these different things. And we're going to be adding here just shortly, we're going to add a signature field and the ability to take pictures from your phone and that in the form.
Now, on the phone, were you using a web browser, or is it the Ignition app?
I was using the Perspective native app on iOS and Android that's available in the stores. It's free. And that is what, when you sort, it's stored in that app. It's stored in that queue in that app.
Perfect.
And then when I'm back in range, it just automatically sends those back to the gateway. So that way everything is good to go. You wouldn't have that functionality directly in a browser. So that's why we have to have the native app on those devices.
Well, that's why I was asking. And I think it's a good, standard operating procedure. If you're going to go out and fill in all these new offline forms now, where you may not have any Wi-Fi or any internet, you can come back in, open the app back up and make sure it synchronizes. I think a lot of us are used to that operating procedure with like, phones or videos or anything we do with our phone where it's cached and we got to come back in and synchronize it. I know I do it a lot when I'm at a trade show taking pictures. I got to get back on the Wi-Fi and sync them all up to the server. So, no, that makes a lot of sense and very straightforward. And I noticed today you're editing this all using the property panel on the right-hand side. You're duplicating, you're editing, you're changing the type of fields, you're changing their text, the titles, the format, whether they're required or not. But did you say that in the future you're going to build an editor in right on the form itself?
Yeah, we're gonna do an editor like with the SVG when you pop up that box and be able to change it. We're gonna do one for the forms. It's an obvious place to do it. We wanted to get this feature out and
Sure.
have people to be able to take advantage of it. But yeah, we're gonna make it so it's easier to build that for new people. They're not having to right click and duplicate and change all these properties. It is a pretty deep property structure here,
Yeah.
and we did that to make it dynamic. But we're gonna come back around again, make it possible, then make it easy. That's kind of the goal always.
Awesome. Looks great.
Cool. Well, let's move on to our next. We have 3 more features to show off here. The next one's alarm metrics. This is a very simple one, a small but mighty feature. So here, for example, if I look at my writable, I've got a couple alarms. It's Boolean, it's integer, and so if I make this Boolean go true right now, it'd be active. And individually, I can look at the alarm, see if they're active. I can look at the alarm status component and see what's happening. But sometimes you want to be able to know if there's any alarms that are active within a folder and below. And so we've now added this alarm metrics metadata to every folder. Every folder can use it, where I can see if anything inside is active or what state the alarms are in with that folder and below. Same thing for a UDT instance. And again, it could be as throughout the entire hierarchy, you can use that. And I can simply just bind something on the screen to any of these properties. Like I could bind this circle to the has active, and if it's active, I can make it red. So very, very easy. Again, small but mighty feature. Nobody has to worry about figuring out, that. We just give you the data right there in the tag database, so you can just use it directly. So for people who have been wanted this for a while, it's kind of a pain to do it yourself. So with this, it's right there, right? You just can use it. So that's a small but mighty one. I always love bringing that in there because it's, not every improvement is major, right? Some of them are little things that really make a big impact. The next one is a huge, a new module that's a really, really powerful module called event streams. And what I want to do is I wanted to take a moment just to kind of talk about this, and then I'll show the demo. Event streams is a way to move data between different sources and destinations. And we've always been able to do that in Ignition, but we've been pretty prescriptive about it. For example, I want to take tag data and write it to MQTT using Sparkplug, or I want to log it to a database. We've had various ways you can do that. And some people use scripting to go above and beyond. Well, we didn't want to have people have to write a lot of code. So event streams is a way to have a low code, no code environment to move data around. And the idea is that you build these streams, and every stream can have a source. So I can look for data coming from a MQTT topic, a Kafka topic. I look from come from a tag, a message queuing system, a database. And when that data comes in, we can then filter it, we can transform it, we can batch it, and then we can send it somewhere. And that could be sending it to another database or another broker or queue, or send it to a REST API, whatever you want to do. And this is we're not being prescriptive at all. You can decide how you want to hook up these sources and these destinations throughout what you're building. And that's the power of event streams. And so let's go over here to our designer, and there's this new area for event streams. I can build a new stream, and let's show Kafka first. So I'm going to do Kafka. And you see there's different sources here: MQTT, tags, Kafka, event listeners, HTTP. There's multiple different ones. So I'm going to do Kafka, and I'm going to listen for a particular Kafka topic. So I've got actually a Kafka connector already configured. So let me go over here to my gateway and log in. I want to show under the services. If I go to connections, service connectors, there is the ability for you to create a new Kafka connection. We're going to add multiple service connectors as we go forward. So I'm already connected to a local broker. And with that, I can go and listen for things to change. So I'm going to listen for Ignition messages to come in. I'm going to call this one Ignition Group 30. And when that data comes in, it's going to be a JSON object. I could filter it to get rid of certain things if I didn't want the message. I can transform it, manipulate that message. I can buffer it to make sure it gets somewhere. And then, of course, we can handle it. Handling is most important, where I can send it somewhere. Let's say I want to log this to a database. I can go insert it into a table called, let's go down here to Kafka messages. I'll store a timestamp into the timestamp field, and we'll do 3 columns: machine, status, and temperature. And these are a string, and a float. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab data from the payload. So the first is event.data.machine. That's the machine part of that JSON message. The second one is a status part of the message, and the last one is a temperature. And this is a expression ignition, and you could do really whatever you want. Combine things together, use our expression functions, all that good stuff. So now I'm going to insert this record into Kafka from that Kafka message. So go ahead and save it. You can see that nothing's coming in yet. Nothing's there. I'm going to go run an outside program here just to be able to send a record. So it's going to say, this should send, here's the payload, 2 ignition messages. It did. Here's the one that came in. It went to the database. And in fact, if I go to my database, look at Kafka messages, boom, there's that record. Quite simple, easy for that to happen. And what's great is I can send it more than just that one place. Let's say I also wanted to log it to or send it to MQTT. Let's send it out there. Let's go to MQTT Explorer. I'll connect here. So we're going to go to database and MQTT at the same time. So let's go and send another record. Boom. Now here's event streams. There's that MQTT stream, another record that came through, and that went to the database as well. So we can go and do as much as we want, and we can have lots of sources, lots of handlers, lots of different places that we can hook this data up. It's quite powerful. Last thing I'll show real quick is, let's do a load. Let's send 100,000 records. Let's watch this thing load up, because this is where the buffering and all that importance comes in, so that we don't lose that data, that it gets there. And you're going to see that we're handling now, we're about 50,000 records we're handling. And in just a few seconds, we're going to have all 100,000 records from Kafka falling to Kafka, being logged to a database and sent to the MQTT server, just like that. And boom, there we go. We've now handled all of that data. And so it's a really great way, really high performing, easy way to move data around. Nobody's writing code. We're going to be able to do this by just simply setting up these different streams. And there's all sorts of different ways that we can do this. So I'm not going to show every one of them, but kind of get the sense of just the power that could be there. And what's really cool is that this is also extensible through the SDK. You can add additional sources, you can add additional handlers, and as a module. And we, as Inductive Automation, are planning to add a lot more. We want to go to Google Pub Sub and AWS services and Azure services, all sorts of different places that we can use that will really make this even more and more powerful. All right. As much as I'd love to show every feature off of the event streams, I can do a whole session just on that module, but it's a really powerful one for sure. Let's move on to this next one, which is probably my favorite. I think this is the crowd favorite of Ignition 8.3. Arguably the most important feature of this entire release is the version control, the DevOps, version control, REST API, and deployment modes. So let's go back. And first and foremost, let's kind of talk about the source control. So I'm going to bring this over. All of our configuration in Ignition 8.3 is stored in the file system as JSON files. There is no more internal databases. It is all readable, easy JSON files. If I go to config and I go to my resources, my core, if I go down to Ignition, here's my database connection. There's that local database connection as JSON. Just simple. It's right there. On that server, easy to see. If I look at my tags, so here's my realistic tags, just done right there. I see them all these the configuration. I can make modifications to that and have that being read into Ignition, but more importantly, I can have this committed to a repository. And that's what I want to show here real briefly. In that I've got a GitHub repository set up, and I want to make that my data directory that. So let's go over here and let's get into our data directory. And I'm just going to run a couple of the simple commands. So git init, and then git commit So we'll commit our first one. So we're going to do that. And then last thing I'll do is I'll put it in that directory. All right. So if I go add this, I'll use a tool now so we can actually see this. Let's go into here. Perfect. I'm going to bring this over. And so here we go. So I can see all this stuff. Here's GitHub desktop. I can see all these changes. I can say, here's my initial commit, and I can commit all these, and I can push those to that repository and have everything available. And I'm not going to show all the different backs and forths, but if every time I make a change, I can see those changes that are happening and that will get brought into that repository and that we can use. Makes it really, really easy to work with. And to be able to see and track those changes over time and have that full version control. The other part that's really powerful is that if I did want to change something, let's open this in, I'm going to open this in Sublime. Let's say that I want to set this last, this tag realistic 7. I want this to be called temperature. Boom. I save that. That if I pull from repository, it came back. I can then go over to my system. I can scan for that change, and you can see that in my realistic folder, it is now from 6 or 7 to temperature. So very easy for us to kind of do that full version control with the files in the file system.
So let me ask you about this. It seems like, so now that Ignition is 100% JSON, everything, all your configuration is stored in that format. It sounds like you can use GitHub like you just showed, but could you use other DevOps packages as well? I imagine that. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. You can use whatever you like. I mean, some people are going to go to GitHub. Some people might have GitLab, which is like the open source version on-prem, or you can use any system that you want. Or of course, maybe you're not storing repo. You're just bringing in files and managing it manually. I mean, the idea is that we want the config to be just available in an easy way. Of course, it's on the Ignition server, right? You have to have access to the server, but that you could, it's easy to modify. Or when I deploy a new system, I could deploy it with configuration already there. We're not trying to hide any of that inside of a binary file, right? We want it to be available and easy to track.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And especially if you have to do wholesale changes, it might be easier to do it this way than to do it in the editor. Not that I'm an expert on using your software, but I can definitely see from other products I've used that just do a Notepad++ sometimes is the easiest way to make bulk changes. So that's very interesting. And so you guys have worked with GitHub. Do you guys use GitHub yourself, or do you use another package?
We use that we use GitHub for our source control for, of course, Ignition, and then we have teams inside of Inductive that are managing our CRM that's written Ignition and other tools, and we use GitHub to manage all the source of that. Now we've converted all to A3 because we can now do every part of the configuration that way, which is really great because then we can have separated development environments where we can then have our own branches for developers. We can then make PRs to bring into production. We can use that full deployment or development methodology, and we can use it now with Ignition, which is great.
That's amazing. And I interrupted you. What did you want to talk about? There was something else.
Oh no, I think that was the main thing. I already had my folder set up as for that repo, and I cleared out the repo, so I didn't push it in there because I messed it up. But it's really easy with this config to have all that as JSON files, and it's all visible, right? That's right there. So that leads us to the next part, which is to be able to go one step further, which is how can I access that configuration, through third-party tools, and that's where the REST API comes into play. And what I want to mention is that the entirety of this web UI, everything you see in this web UI, is accessible in the REST API. It's now built into Ignition. So in fact, we built the new web UI against that API. So any button, any action that's in here, you could do in a third-party tool like Ansible or in your Perspective application or whatever you want. And so the way you use it is you go down to the platform, you add an API key. I'm going to call this token. And I don't have a security right now, so I'm going to use my read-write privileges for that. I'll create it. Here's my token. I've got it now for use. You can use Postman or any tool. I'm going to use this tool called Insomnia. I'm going to put my token in here. And so now I could call, endpoints on there. Now, before I call one, how do I know what endpoints are there? Well, you go to localhost, or you go to your server and you go /open API, and we self-document all the different APIs that are part of Ignition. So by looking at like devices, and I wanted to list out all of devices, here's the endpoint that's there and how to use it. And you can see there's a whole slew of them by modules over here. So if I go back in, I call this, I want to list all my device connections. There I go. There's my dairy, and I have 2 of them, and there's my other one that's just my simulator. So if I want to get my database connections, there's my local MariaDB connection that's there, and I can see all of the status, all of the metrics that are there. I can see all of the health checks, everything that's part of it comes back in this API. Not only can you do that, you can do actions if you have the right privileges. And so I'm going to add an OPC UA device. I'm going to add a new PLC to Ignition. So let's go over here. Connections, devices. I got 2 right now. Let's go. Let's go add the Modbus. So here I'm adding a Modbus connection. Here's the config for it. And boom, let's send that in. And look, there it is, ready to go. And it's going to try to connect, but I can now easily work with this config. In fact, we're going to make a playbook for Ansible that people can use for all the different actions that are part of Ignition. It really allows you to extend that even further.
Now, that's pretty amazing, but I do have to ask, like when we're building a SCADA or HMI system, a lot of times we'll have passwords that we have to put in somewhere. That's not in plain text, right? In the JSON file, is it?
No, so that's a good question, and this is a feature that I wasn't gonna show off necessarily, but it's an important one. So if I look at a database connection, we are storing passwords in here, right? And that password is embedded. So if I look at the file, let's go and look at that database connection. There's my local. You can see that the password is embedded, but it's encrypted, right? So all that, they're not seeing plain text, but that lies the problem. All IT departments don't want that, even the encrypted password, to be in the config. Meaning that if I take a backup of Ignition and I give it to you, you have my encrypted password, which means if I were to be able to be on your network and connected to your systems, I can run my Ignition with your backup and connect to your systems, right? And which is potentially a bad thing.
Yeah.
So where you're going now is we have the ability to use, this is referenced, to use secrets providers, external secrets providers. And that is here where I can add one to things like HashiCorp Vault or Bitwarden or other tools that are out there, and I can have them manage the passwords and certificates, encryption keys, and I can pull it into Ignition if I need to. So if I create, I'm going to use one internal here, called it internal. And, the idea, if I add a secret to this, let's call it database, and give it a password, that instead of embedding it, let's go to my database connection, edit, we're going to reference in that internal provider and that database key. And so if I look at the config is quite simple, right? Where is it coming from? And but it acts exactly the same way. So that's an important distinction, something that we're always doing to improve the security posture of Ignition, doing more and more. But these external secrets providers are becoming commonplace, and IT departments want every system to go against them. And of course, now Ignition can play in that game, and that whole system's is part of the SDK, so you can extend that with other custom ones. There's, we always try to make it, if we don't directly do it, make it possible with that SDK.
Nice.
All right, so I know we're going a little long, but I'm going to add one quick last one, which is our deployment modes. And this is an important feature for, be able to have environmental separation. So let me go over here. Where people want to have development, staging, and production. And there's differences in these environments. For example, a development system might have a simulator PLC, whereas staging might have a test PLC, and of course, you need production. You might have different databases in staging and production. There's these differences, these nuances in the configuration. And what we've done is make that allow you to define those nuances right directly in Ignition. So I can add a mode. For example, I can add development as a mode. And I can then go into my config. Let's say I go to my database connection. I can provide an override for development. And if I look at that, it's inheriting the core, and I can actually then make a modification, say, you know what, this is actually going to be a different IP address or a different database or whatever it is for our development environment. And right now I'm running the core, but we have a flag you specify in Ignition. When you install Ignition, you can say, I want that to be a development environment, in which case when it starts up, it'll pull all the configuration for that branch, that development branch, whereas my production system would pull the production. So now I can actually have all my config in our repository all combined together, but it's safe to move from one environment to the next because each environment is going to pull its configuration based on the mode that it's defined in. And this is, if you don't have this, you got to be careful about what you commit or what you bring from one environment to the next. With this, it's all safe because we've been able to give you that separation for all the config that you have. And again, huge, I say small, it's not really small, but like it's very, very mighty because it makes it so much easier to understand how the configuration works. So that's the big tour of Ignition 8.3. There's many other features that are in there. And you can take a look at the change logs and take a look at the documentation. There's lots of videos, lots of good stuff out there to kind of see all the different features in action. And what we can't wait to do is continue to develop on these. And we can't wait to see what people do with all these amazing features and the types of applications they're going to be able to get to, and the pain points that they can solve with this release. So I'm excited to be able to show everybody this. And if anybody has any questions and wants to connect with me on LinkedIn or just connect with me, we'd love to do that if you have questions or you want a deeper dive yourself into this release. So that's it, Shawn, from my side.
Well, Travis, I really enjoyed that. You went through a lot of stuff in a short period of time, and you explained it very well. I appreciate you doing that, and explaining it as you did the live demo, which I think those listening, we get a large percentage of our audience who listens and doesn't watch, and so I really appreciate you being descriptive like that and explaining what you were doing as you were going. And I mean, this list of new features, this isn't the entire list, but what you showed us today was pretty impressive. And I'm sure your customers out there are pretty excited to get their hands on 8.3. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and doing this demo. And I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, no, and you know what? We're all changing industry for the better. I would love to hear, feedback on what you guys are doing with these things. Go check it out. Connect with me if you have questions or connect. We're happy to do more of these kinds of things, and I appreciate Shawn being on the show and being able to share off this amazing new release. So thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I want to thank Travis for coming on the show and bringing us up to speed on Ignition 8.3. I've heard from a lot of you out there that you use this software, and even if you don't, it's great to know what the other guys are doing, right? So I really appreciate Inductive Automation sponsoring this episode so it could be released ad-free. And you guys could just enjoy this update about Ignition. And with that, I want to wish you all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.